Let's start with a wild thought experiment. What if you woke up tomorrow morning, glanced at a world map, and a huge, vital piece of it was just gone?
So let's really dive into this. Here's the setup. For just 24 hours, the entire country of India simply vanishes. I don't mean it's destroyed or invaded, I mean it's just gone. Poof. And along with it, 1/6 of the entire human population.
I mean, what actually happens when that many people, that much land, and that much history just disappear completely without a sound? Well, the very first response wouldn't come from any government or military. No, the first thing to react would be the planet itself.
In those first few minutes, the Earth would react with incredible, unbelievable violence. We're not just talking about an empty spot on a map here. We're talking about a physical wound being torn open in the planet's crust.
So boom, a void of 3.3 million square kilometers has just opened up. This isn't just empty space. It's like a fundamental piece of the planetary puzzle has been yanked out of the board.
And that sets off this absolutely insane chain reaction. First, the void opens. Second, the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea don't just flow in, they rush in with unimaginable force. Third, that collision triggers mega tsunamis, gigantic waves racing towards Africa, Southeast Asia, even Australia. And then fourth and fifth, the seafloor itself starts to collapse. And all that tectonic pressure India was putting on Asia for millions of years is suddenly gone, sending seismic shockwaves across the entire continent.
And the effects go even deeper. The planet's mass is literally redistributed, which would ever so slightly alter gravity and could throw off every GPS satellite in orbit. And that sudden release of tectonic pressure, it dramatically cranks up the risk for major earthquakes all across Asia, creating a legacy of instability that would last way longer than our 24 hours.
So after the planet has had its violent initial say, the next wave of chaos hits us, the human systems. In the hours that follow, the incredibly interconnected world that we've all built begins to unravel, piece by piece.
This is basically a dashboard for global collapse. The Indian monsoon, which is a critical engine for the world's weather, it just collapses. The global stock markets, they go into an absolute freefall. The internet, which we think of as this magical cloud, suddenly becomes incredibly fragile. And even the skies become chaotic as a huge chunk of airspace just vanishes from the map. Let's just take the weather for a second. The Indian landmass is pretty much the engine that drives the monsoon. So you take out the engine and the whole system breaks down. Instantly, you get rainfall failure across South Asia, a huge risk of drought in Southeast Asia, and then these bizarre weather patterns in East Africa, flooding followed by drying. We're talking about billions of people whose food and water supply is now in serious jeopardy. Okay, now for the digital world. A lot of us don't really think about how much of our global tech infrastructure runs through India. IT services, software development, data centers, you name it. Critical undersea internet cables would be severed, and all of a sudden, the systems you and I rely on every single second, banking, flight reservations, you name it, they all start to flicker and fail. The internet, it turns out, isn't a cloud at all. It has real, physical breaking points.
So beyond the physical destruction and the systemic collapse, there's a deeper impact, the human void. This is about what happens to our global security, our culture, and just our collective state of mind when 1.4 billion people are suddenly silenced.
Just look at the shift here. It's from total stability to absolute panic. We have to remember, India's a nuclear power. The second it vanishes, every single security assumption we have is just shattered. You go from a world with a predictable balance of power to one where military alerts were spiking everywhere, the UN is calling emergency sessions, and the only question anyone has is, what just happened, and are we next?
And then there's the silence. It would be deafening. No more Bollywood films, no new Indian music, no art, no literature, no philosophy from one of the world's oldest and most dynamic civilizations. It's a sudden, profound cultural hole that the entire world would feel in its bones.
And this right here, this leads to the most terrifying shock of all. The realization that if a nation of 1.4 billion people can vanish without a trace, it proves that our own existence, our own civilization, is so much more fragile than we ever let ourselves believe. It's a fundamental crack in our understanding of reality, and it would trigger a deep existential anxiety across the entire globe.
So, our 24 hours are up. What happens when the country reappears? And maybe more importantly, what is the ultimate lesson we take away from this absolutely terrifying thought experiment? So India reappears,
But it doesn't return to the same world it left, not even close. It comes back to a planet that's been physically scarred by mega tsunamis, a world with flooded coastlines and ruined infrastructure. It returns to a global economy still reeling from the shock and weather patterns that have been permanently changed. The recovery from just one day of absence? It would take years, maybe even decades.
When you boil it all down, this whole experiment reveals one fundamental truth. The world isn't just a collection of different countries. It's a single, deeply interconnected system. It really is like a living organism. And we just saw what happens when you try to remove a vital organ, even for just a day. The entire body goes into shock.
So in the end, if India were to disappear for just 24 hours, the impact would be so unbelievably profound, it wouldn't just change our maps, it would fundamentally change how humanity itself understands its own survival.